Hello everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Before you get too far into this great tale from the past, please like the video and leave a comment saying what time you are watching this video and where you are tuning in from. Please subscribe. Now settle in. Samuel Whitaker was not the sort of man anyone would have called bold. At 25, he had lived his whole life in a small town in Missouri, mending fences, tending fields, and dreaming of a world larger than the ridges of the Ozarks. The winter of 1848 changed everything. News of gold, real gold, found in the rivers of California spread like wildfire. Men sold farms, abandoned shops, and vanished overnight, chasing riches that might never exist. Samuel resisted at first, until a letter from his cousin, already on his way west, arrived in March. The words sparked something fierce inside him. The farm had been his father's life, but for Samuel it felt like a cage. With trembling hands he packed a satchel, kissed his mother goodbye, and promised he would return with more than dreams. By the time the wagon train gathered at Independence, Missouri, Samuel had only a sturdy mule, a pickaxe, and a heart thundering with both dread and hope. The first weeks of the journey tested every man. Dust clung to their tongues, oxen pulled wagons until their shoulders bled, and nights echoed with the howls of coyotes. Samuel quickly learned that fortune-seekers were a strange breed. Preachers who had abandoned their pulpits, farmers who had left wives behind, gamblers running from debts, and a few who seemed born only for the wilderness. He grew close to one, Thomas Avery, a wiry man with restless eyes who carried a violin strapped to his pack. At campfires, Thomas played tunes from home, and the music carried Samuel through the endless march of days. Yet the farther west they traveled, the more graves dotted the trail. Cholera, accidents, and hunger claimed many, and every mound of earth reminded Samuel that the price of gold was often a man's very life. Still, when they reached the wide plains of Nebraska, he pressed on, his eyes fixed on the horizon, believing fortune waited beyond the mountains. By the time they reached the Sierra Nevada, Samuel's body was lean, hardened by miles of dust and hardship. Snow crowned the peaks, glittering like a warning. The climb was brutal. Wagons splintered on sharp inclines, animals collapsed, and more than one traveler, delirious from cold, wandered off into the white and was never seen again. Samuel's mule stumbled often, but he coaxed it forward, whispering promises neither of them truly understood. Thomas Avery lost his violin to the fire one night, when sparks leapt from the pit and swallowed the fragile wood. The silence that followed was heavier than the snow itself. Yet one dawn, after weeks of relentless climbing, the travelers crested a ridge and looked down upon a valley bursting with green. California lay before them. Men wept openly, not for gold, but for the simple fact that they had survived what so many had not. Samuel whispered a prayer to his father's memory and began the descent. The Sacramento Valley smelled of pine, earth, and promise. Tents and shanties crowded every bend of the rivers, and voices rang in a dozen tongues, English, Spanish, Chinese, German, all shouting the same word. Gold! Samuel wandered through the chaos, dazed by the fever that gripped the land. Merchants sold shovels for 10 times their worth, and gamblers lured miners into tents thick with pipe smoke. Everywhere, men crouched in streams, swishing pans in endless circles. Samuel bought his own battered pan, found a quiet stretch of river, and began. Day after day, he scooped gravel, washed it clean, and squinted at the gleam of mica that mocked him. The real nuggets, the ones that changed lives, were rare, and fortune seemed to play cruel tricks. One morning, when his mule brayed at the water's edge, Samuel thought he saw a flash of true gold. He panned frantically, his hands shaking. But when the pan cleared, he found nothing but stone. Samuel quickly discovered that gold country was less about luck than endurance. He met miners who had toiled for months and found only a handful of flakes, while others struck a vein overnight and vanished with their fortunes. The camps grew restless, filled with men who drank away their earnings or turned violent when luck abandoned them. Samuel himself went weeks without finding more than a few specks of dust. One evening, he returned to his tent to find it ransacked, his mule gone. Desperation clawed at him. With no mule, no food, and no real gold to his name, he considered leaving, just walking back east until the land swallowed him. But Thomas Avery appeared again, older, leaner, carrying a shovel worn smooth with use. He clasped Samuel's shoulder and said, "This land eats cowards alive. Stay or leave broken. But if you stay, dig like a man who believes the earth owes him something." Samuel stayed. It happened in June, under a sun that blazed like judgment. Samuel, exhausted and half-mad with hunger, dug into a rocky bank where water trickled lazily. The gravel was heavy, resisting his pan. Then he saw it, real gold, clinging to the bottom like frozen sunlight. Not flakes, not dust, but a nugget the size of his thumb. His breath caught and tears stung his eyes. He shouted until his voice cracked, drawing others from the river, but by then he had tucked the nugget deep into his boot. That night he could not sleep. The weight of the nugget pressed against his ankle, heavier than iron. Dreams of wealth tangled with fears of theft. In the morning, Samuel walked into town and traded a sliver of it for supplies: flour, beans, a new mule. As he left the store, he saw men eyeing him, suspicion sharp in their faces. Wealth, he realized, was not freedom. It was a target. Samuel's strike did not go unnoticed. A burly miner named Crawford, known for his quick temper, began shadowing him along the river. Crawford had once been a butcher in New York, and his hands still looked like they were made for breaking bone. One evening, Crawford confronted Samuel outright, demanding to know where he had found the nugget. Samuel, remembering Thomas's words about digging like a man owed, refused. Fists flew, and the fight ended with Samuel bloodied but unbroken, Crawford vowing vengeance. The camp buzzed with talk of the quarrel, and Samuel felt the walls of suspicion closing in. Men who once nodded in greeting now glanced at him with envy. Gold had made him both visible and vulnerable. That night, Thomas urged him to consider moving upriver, deeper into the wilderness where the greedy eyes of camp could not follow. Samuel agreed, for the glimmer of gold was worth nothing if he did not live to keep it. Leaving the crowded camp, Samuel and Thomas struck north, following a narrow creek that twisted through pine forests. The air was cleaner, the nights quieter, broken only by the crackle of their fire. Here, Samuel felt something he had not known since leaving Missouri: peace. They built a lean-to from branches, smoked venison over the fire, and worked the creek each day. Progress was slow, but the land seemed generous, yielding small nuggets and steady dust. It was not fortune, but it was survival. Thomas spoke often of leaving one day, of buying land and building a place where music could fill the air again. Samuel listened but rarely answered. Deep inside, he felt the hunger of the gold still gnawing at him, demanding more. Every sunrise promised the chance of another strike, and every night he dreamed of rivers running yellow. The wilderness shielded him from rivals, but it could not shield him from himself. When winter came, it came hard. Snow buried their lean-to and the creek froze solid. Hunting grew scarce, and Samuel's hands split with cold until his fingers bled. Gold panning was impossible and their stores dwindled. Hunger drove them to chew leather straps and melt snow for water. In those long nights, Thomas's stories were the only warmth left. He spoke of a farm his father once owned, of dances in Tennessee, of a girl he had loved but never married. Samuel shared less, though sometimes he spoke of his mother, her hands rough with work yet gentle when she brushed his hair as a boy. By February, Thomas had grown pale and weak, coughing blood into the snow. Samuel feared losing him as he had lost so many on the trail. With desperation, he prayed, not for gold this time, but for survival, for spring, for the mercy of a land that seemed intent on burying them both. Spring returned with thawing rivers and green shoots piercing the earth. Thomas, though weakened, survived, and together they returned to the creek. The current roared with snowmelt, carrying gravel and with it gold. Samuel's pan filled with flakes brighter than any he had seen before. By May they had collected enough to fill a small pouch. It was not the fortune others dreamed of, but it was real, tangible wealth. One afternoon, as Samuel sifted gravel, he found another nugget larger than the first, and this time he shouted for Thomas to see. The two men clasped hands, laughing like children. Yet even in joy, Samuel felt the shadow of Crawford still lingering in the back of his mind. Somewhere downriver or in town, the butcher-turned-miner was waiting. And Samuel knew the more gold he gathered, the sooner Crawford, or men like him, would come to take it. The creek yielded more gold that summer than Samuel dared hope. His pouch grew heavy, and he dreamed of home, of walking back to Missouri with riches enough to buy not just land but a life. Yet fate never let a man rest long in the gold country. One evening, while returning from the river, Samuel spotted a familiar figure leaning against a pine tree, Crawford. His broad arms were crossed, his grin wolfish. "Heard you found a sweet vein up here," Crawford said, voice dripping with malice. Samuel's heart hummed.